Hey, welcome everybody to the podcast show. I got a dear friend here with me today. His name is Jeff Drake. He is a entrepreneur all the way through. I got to know him through a church, and when we started to get to know each other, I knew right away that we were going to hit it off just because... Connected almost instantly, which is pretty cool. And then we also have a mutual friend that is going to be on the show, that actually a cousin of mine that I didn't know that you knew too, which was pretty cool. So we had some other connections as well.
Oh, that'll be cool.
Yeah. So here, we'll start with this, Jeff. What was your childhood like?
My childhood, I was one of 5 kids, mom and dad, blessed with an amazing mom and dad, right? And
where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Wyoming.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so grew up in Wyoming. Dad was a factory worker, worked hard day after day after day. I think that he probably, more than probably, no doubt, he assumed, mom and dad, I think, assumed that I was going to follow right in their footprints, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my dad did. That's what my uncles did. They all worked at a factory. You know, I watched my dad get up at 4 o'clock every morning, week after week, year after year. He was relentless in, going to work.
Yeah.
So
just routine every single day. Yeah.
Just routine. And I think they assumed that I was going to be in that same exact vein.
Yeah.
Fast forward, we get to, junior, senior year in high school, and I marched to a different beat, right?
Yeah.
I didn't, I really appreciated what mom and dad did, but I knew that the world was bigger than that.
Right.
Somehow, right? And I was going to go attack it somehow or another. I knew nothing, right? But
you wanted to get out, go to work, pay bills, get out of work. You wanted to live a life.
And I don't know that I would say that they didn't live a life. I was just going a different path.
Yeah.
And I think when I made that decision, I think the reality was, I think mom and dad were a little bit discouraged. Like, seriously, you're not going to do this?
Right.
And I don't think it was till years later when they legitimately realized, super cool.
Yeah.
But it
like
took,
he's using his passion, what God called him to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it took a little while because it was a world they didn't live in.
Right.
Right? It was a world they didn't live in, to jump out and follow my passions, if you will.
Well, I think that, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but I feel like back in the day there was a mindset, especially after World War II, and you had this mindset of we needed manufacturing. So, I mean, major manufacturing, right?
It was a good job.
It was, and that's where people...
It paid well.
Oh, right, absolutely. A lot of the neighborhoods in a lot of areas, you can see these old houses that they built the same house over and over again
100%.
because they're just trying to get people into homes, and they all push them into factories because we wanted to be a huge producer and goods. So yeah.
And it was it was something to hang your hat on if you could get in to some of these factories, right? I mean, my dad had like one opportunity.
What factory was he at?
He was at Steelcase.
Okay.
And he had one opportunity in his career to grandfather somebody in. Because it was difficult to get in.
That's interesting.
And so when his number finally came up and I had my opportunity to accept and I didn't, that was really hard, right? Because it's like winning the lottery.
That's how they did it. They would say, hey, you're allowed to automatically have somebody come in.
Exactly. You get one chance.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
You get one chance because that's... if you were middle class, that was a big deal to get into one of the big, good factories. I mean, in Wyoming, you either wanted to work for GM or Steelcase.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's what you aspired to.
I had a lot of family live at
a kid that grew up in Wyoming, right? So those that didn't were really, either the crazy academic shoot-the-moon kids or... odd ducks like myself. if you will.
Yeah.
At that
so
point.
how did that make your dad feel? Like do you know?
Yeah, I mean, it came out a little while later. He was a little, they were put back, right? Like, you're like, seriously? Like, Dad's worked that hard for that long, and to have an opportunity, and you turned it down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it was a little hard at first.
So what was your mindset there? Because that couldn't have been easy for you either, because you had a lot of people looking at you like, what are you doing here?
Right. It's that first, it's that first form of, adversity, if you will. It's like, like, now what? Right. So from there I went to, I got a job working for a material handling company in the engineering department. And there was a small company, but the gentleman that ran that company, the entrepreneur that started it and ran that company, really gave me a fire for and an insight to what entrepreneurship looked like.
Yeah, you're kind of eyeballing him on the side, and he's talking to you. Okay.
Exactly. And he gave me opportunity as a just out of high school kid to have an opportunity to witness what small business and getting out there look like.
Yeah.
And it appealed to me. Yeah. And it's like, I want to do that.
Was your drive back then? So like, I noticed mine evolved into it. In the beginning, it was, I want to become successful. And now mine has been, I just want to do things. I just want to do stuff. Like it has nothing to do maybe with success or money. It has to do with just doing things and seeing, change in the world and helping other people. Like in the beginning, like what was it that drove you about that guy? Was it his freedom that he can do the things that he wanted, that he could use his creativity? Because when I think of you, I think of creativity. Like, right, you're very creative. So something got you to where you're at today. Was it that guy?
So I think it was really the appeal for myself was running my own company.
Right.
I mean, I don't think I was thinking money and big house on the lake, and I think I legitimately wanted to go run my own company.
Do your own thing.
Do my own thing.
Beat to your own drum, like you said.
I could either go to the factory, or I could create my own thing, that creative piece, create my own thing and do my own thing, right?
That's awesome.
From there, I didn't do that right away. From there, I actually went from, working in the engineering department of a material handling company to, I ended up in school for engineering.
Yeah.
And had an opportunity about 2 years in to work in a tool and die shop. And from there, I, again, modified life a little bit, thought I had found my career, and went on to be a journeyman tool and die maker.
That's what you're headed towards. That's what you're. Did you have a passion for that, or was it just what you were doing?
I think I was good at it. I'm good at my hands, right? So I think that it fit who I was well. Journeyman tool and die makers, especially back in the day, thought they were special. I mean, and I think in some ways
they were.
Back in the day, there wasn't as much, computer controlled equipment. There was a lot to building tools and dies, and it wasn't just with your hands. A journeyman die maker knew a lot about a lot of what they did, and I think they felt like prima donnas because of it.
Yeah.
But I think it also I think that piece of it empowered myself to be able to look at myself and say, if you work at it, you can get there.
So you were like so do you feel like during your time is when the trailblazing happened of the tool and die industry?
I think the tool and die industry gave me a confidence that I don't think that I had prior to that, right? I mean, by the time you go from zero to journeyman tool and die maker, you feel, well, you accomplished something. It's probably
Right.
not much different than somebody who starts college as a college freshman and then either gets a bachelor's degree or a master's degree.
Right.
There's that sense of accomplishment and all the hard work behind you that got you there. Right?
Yeah, what's interesting about that is when I was in manufacturing, we had, your normal factory workers, right? And then I was a normal factory worker, right? But then I felt like the tool and die guys were like the it factor. I did, even over some
like
management.
They were it, for
but
sure, right?
Even over management, I would say a little bit. Because they had a skill that you needed, especially when something would break or something you need, right? When it came to the tools, right? I mean, we're putting in 2.5 ton molds, right? And sometimes those things would, break, and you'd rip off a piece, or because you opened a mold or something when you probably shouldn't have, and the hydraulics not open or something goofy
Die
like
makers, die makers were of the mentality, like you'd hear it all the time. It's like, if you got a bad day going, it's like, hey, I got wheels on my toolbox for a reason. I'm gonna get mad, I'm gonna roll out, and I'm gonna go and do another die shop, and here we go.
Yeah.
And they just assumed that they could roll their box out at noon and by 1 be working at a new shop, and that's somewhat the way it was back in the day.
Right. Yeah, because they were so needed.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
So you got into tool and die.
Yep.
And I feel like so you had the entrepreneur spirit. You felt like that entrepreneur spirit from that was the tool and die, where you could be creative, you could be almost your own boss, because of not your own boss, but essentially you could leave if you wanted to, because there was always another job down the street.
Right.
I think a lot of jobs are like that right now. I think that mentality was at that time in tool and die. I think we're there in the world today, and it might shift back because there's so many jobs. You could do work at McDonald's and go right down to the McDonald's down the road and get another
Sure.
job now, right? And I think that feeling that you had created. So you got your entrepreneur spirit. How did you get out of that? Because you're loving your work, you're loving your job.
I was. At the same time, my wife had graduated from art school, and interestingly enough, her goal and desire was to start her own marketing company.
Oh, that's cool.
So right out of school, it's like, hey, I've got a good job. Go dip your feet in the water and go see what you can do. And she's talented. She's talented. She's been my business partner for 31 years. And she went out and started a advertising marketing company. And, she was young and she had no idea what she was doing, but she had drive.
Yeah. And you can get a far way with drive.
She had drive. And so she went after it. And in the process of her building that company, she got busy. I was moonlighting. I'd work, days at the dye shop, and I'd work half the night or all night sometimes in the, in our, basement or wherever our, office was in the house, doing advertising and marketing. And it was in the early days of the whole computer, world. When she started her company, she started pre-computer graphics.
That's interesting.
So pre-computer graphics.
So before, explain that a little more, what that means.
So when you would put together artwork to go to print, like you'd be taping down graphics to a grid paper, and
really
your text in some cases was literally, like rub off letters or it's crazy. And then, you'd click a picture of it, and then it would go off to print. They'd make a film. And so we started back, there, and very shortly thereafter, we purchased our first Apple computer, and it had, I think, 8 megs of RAM, or a 8 meg hard drive. And it was crazy. One of the first Apples that were out there.
Was the big box one?
It was kind of big, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I actually showed a home, and a guy had one of those still in it in the basement. He collected Apple computers. He had them all, a bunch of different old school ones. And it was kind of
finally started dumping them.
Did you? You had them?
Oh, I had them all.
Oh, that's funny.
We've owned one of or multiples of everyone, right? So either way, she started the company and she got busy, and, we dove all the way in, and I went to the owner of our dye shop and said, would you be willing to allow me, a leave of absence? And I told him what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to go work with my wife and explore whether or not we can, I can go into business with her.
Right.
And so I took a 8-week leave of absence with the goal of, if I can, in that 8 weeks, come away with my own customer base, not just being an assistant to my wife, but if I can come away with my own client base, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
8 weeks later, I went back and said, I'm done. I quit.
That's pretty awesome.
So we go out and we do this on our own, and we didn't have a, I didn't have a mentor, right? I didn't rub shoulders with people that were doing it, I wish I would have had, people like you in my life way back then.
Right.
I think our progress would have been so much quicker, right?
Yeah, people that you're rolling with and doing life with.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, a lot of the people that we were doing life with were not entrepreneurs.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, they were naysayers, right? Like,
why are you doing that? You're crazy.
Left,
yeah.
That paycheck for the possibility of nothing.
And these are people that love you.
For sure.
Yeah.
And or people that I worked with, right? I mean, they thought I was crazy. Nobody leaves tool and die. You're set for life.
Yeah.
Right? Like
job security, nice paychecks.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything you're ever going to need or want, like, you've got it here already, and you're walking away from it. And we did. And I'm here to tell you, it was not easy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we walked away from the paycheck, and guess what? We went without a paycheck.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, that's scary, right?
My wife's grandpa, who was a legitimate, successful entrepreneur, said, dude, you can't live on love.
Yeah. I can, and I'll show you.
Well, and therein is a little piece of who I am. Tell me I can't do it, and I'm going to prove you wrong.
Right.
Right? And I might go through a lot of pain and process to prove you wrong on that one, but if my heart is set on something and you say I can't do it, it just fuels me.
Right.
Right?
Would you say, through those hard times, looking back, would you change it now?
No, I don't think I would.
Yeah, that's the crazy
I don't
part.
think I would change it, but if you understand, if I was doing it again today with the knowledge and wisdom that I have, it would look a lot different.
Oh, definitely.
But
you
I wouldn't have lived on so much love.
But you don't know it. But what if I told you that you could, but you didn't have that knowledge and wisdom? It was that pain that got you to where you're at today.
Absolutely.
So it's like, if you could, I think that's what we miss in life sometimes, is we're so afraid of putting ourselves in pain because or in taking these leaps. But the fact is, essentially, that's what life is about. It's stretching yourself. It's stretching yourself into these bold. I'm hearing the same story with a lot of people we interview, and it's these unknown, uncertain stretching of who I am.
Yep.
And it's gonna weigh, and sometimes it's not fun. You're like, this sucks. Like, and especially when you start to have kids, and I'm sure things started to shift for you when you had kids, because you're like, this can affect more than just me. Because me and my wife, we could live in the back of our Volkswagen bus that we have, like, right? Like,
right.
And we're okay. But these little ones don't know any different. And that is a real stretching, because now that's a whole nother burning desire to make sure you succeed. It's that all in on everything you have.
And even when you go all in, sometimes things don't go all right.
Yeah.
I mean, we went from marketing company,
right,
to we got to the point where our company was growing, and we received at the end of the year, these nice note cards from our customers saying, holy cow, thank you so much. we killed it this year. We grew by this many $1 million. We hit our goals. And we started reading these cards, and, I just looked at, my wife and said, I'm not saying we didn't get paid for this, but I think we worked too hard to get them to where they wanted to be. And yet now we're starting over. So running a marketing company is like a crack addiction. Yeah. You're like really, really busy and you're all in, and then you eventually finish that project, and it might be it might be a 6-month project, it might be a 2-year project, whatever, and you get to the end of it, and now you're hunting for the next,
right?
The next hit, right? And so you're always pushing, and we got to the point where we wanted to do something, for ourselves. So even though we were running our own marketing company, I still felt like instead of working for the man, it was a different, there was this push that, all right, now we've got to go find another company, another nonprofit, another, whatever to work for. And it's always, we were chasing, what felt like an addiction that we weren't ever going to get to the end of.
Right.
And
so what I'm like hearing too is like, so you got because you wanted something on your own, so you got out of tool and die to now you're starting your own marketing company, but now you're starting to have so this is what I want our viewers to hear. This is because I think what happens is like we move on, and this is the whole purpose of the whole show is I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and you can hear it in what you're saying, is they get in their grind and they're trying to solve problems to get to their desired life that they're trying to live. It doesn't always mean money. It might be lifestyle. It might be just like, hey, I just want a little bit of freedom. I want to be able to use my creativity. It could be all these things. But one of the biggest things I'm hearing is you felt something. You got to the goal that you wanted to get, and now you're feeling another thing. And that feeling is, I want to, and I think that's what's transitioning you constantly. And
right.
I don't think would you feel like you're ever going to end? Ever?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think my strengths lie in business development and business forecasting.
Right.
All right. So I have this innate ability to look ahead.
Right.
And when we were in a marketing company, look at these companies come in with clean eyes.
Right.
And they have a goal in front of them, and with clean eyes we could say, here's how we're going to get there.
Right.
Right. And so we would implement a plan for them to get them where they want to be, and at the same time realizing that it didn't play out for us, not
It played out for them, not you.
But running
Let's
a
be
marketing
honest.
running a marketing company can be hugely lucrative, but it wasn't paying off in the way that at least we were looking for. I was looking for more than just money.
Right.
Okay.
You wanted freedom.
So,
you wanted all these things.
I don't know if it was freedom. I wanted, at that point, it's like I want to do this for myself.
Yeah.
I want to market for what I'm doing, and I'll write myself a thank you card at the end of the year. Right?
I like it. Yeah, yeah.
But we wanted our own, our own thing, our own company that we could invest into that would provide dividends and the benefits of owning a company down the road, rather than this start and ending point and then starting over again. So I felt like I kept, building companies one after another, but it was always for somebody else.
Right.
So coming alongside you and taking you from 0 to 60, and then you get to 60 and you're ecstatic, and I got to start back at 0 again with the next company.
Right.
And that felt hard. So.
So what did you decide? Like what happened during that transition? Because that couldn't have been easy either.
So in this case, the transition itself was pretty easy because I was marketing for a floral company.
Okay.
And took them from a 7-year high to they're closing their doors, which is when we stepped into the company. To take them from we're closing our doors to growing them.
Right.
So I ended up, being a part of that company, and, just part of life and growing and learning. And, it was a huge jump on my behalf to jump into a company that's sinking.
Yeah, they're failing at that time.
They're failing.
Yeah.
So here again, I walked away from a paycheck again, right? Because now I'm not marketing, let's say, for your company anymore.
Right.
Now I'm jumping in to something that I'm, if you will, investing into, and
It comes down to investing in yourself.
so
Right?
for sure.
You're double downing on yourself. And I think that's really what people need to hear here. I really do. I think it's saying, I think that's what, if I could drive anything home, it's I take huge risk, and this isn't something that's easy for you. These aren't decisions where you're like, oh, I got, as far as I know, it's not like I got $1 million over here, mom and dad. If something happens to me, that I get this lifeline. I'm taking huge risk to get to where I'm at. That's what I'm feeling.
You know what, though? I think I don't know that I look at it 100% that way. I think as a business person, you are always investing, and you have to understand that, right?
Right.
As a business person, you never stop the investment, right? So you're either, for Michelle and I, we're either investing into our life and in our future, or we're investing into our death. Because the second
That's
you
good.
stop investing, because you're either going up or you're going down.
Right.
No company stays like this.
No, I actually heard one time
you
it's
just-
like walking up an escalator the opposite way. So if you stand still, you're actually going backwards.
Exactly, 100%.
To get to the top, you have
So
to
you're
run.
going down,
You have to
right?
run if you want to get to the
So
top.
it's
Yeah.
always an investment.
Yeah.
So in investments come in time, it comes in money, it comes in struggle, it comes in so many different ways, right?
Right.
So,
But why do it then? I know. I'm asking you. Why do it then?
Why? Here again, everybody's built differently. Not
Right.
everybody's an entrepreneur, right?
100%.
I love what I do. I love going from 0 to 60. I love the setting the goal out there and running after it. I love being one of the 1% that made it past 2 years in a business, right?
Right. I think that's why me and you get along so well. Because I think once you're in that, like me personally, I was never into sports. I was never into a lot of things a lot of people are. I'm personally into business.
Yep.
That's what I love talking about. And I think that's why we get along so well and we clicked. And I think it's because we enjoy talking about it. Different aspects, different ideas. It's
the
just
business in general, right? I mean, I love what I do. You love what you do. But if somebody jerked it away from you today,
Yeah.
they'd be like, "All right,
what's next?
What's next?"
Yeah, I look at you and say, okay, what's next? What, absolutely.
rather than go get a job at McDonald's,
Yeah.
we're gonna drag our hide on the ground for 10 minutes,
Right.
and then
Exactly.
jump into something else.
Figure it
So
out.
it's what we
Yeah.
do, right?
Right.
So, and not everybody is wired that way, and not everybody has a stomach to do that, right?
Yeah, because it's a lot of uncertainty.
There's a lot of, and it doesn't always go well.
It doesn't. No, there's been many times that it
doesn't-
hasn't gone
it
well
doesn't-
for me.
It
Yeah.
doesn't always go well. So here I am, I'm investing into this floral company, and we have an opportunity to grow it from 3 locations. I closed 1, we're down to 2, and then I grew it to 7. And at that point, we had an opportunity to flip and sell the company. And I ultimately ended up accepting a job, here and back into the job
Yeah,
thing, right?
yeah.
Accepted a job as director of operations over 5 states, $22 million worth of floral shops, with the goal that I would take that, the company that we built here in Michigan, and that we would unroll that methodology across 5 states and $22 million worth of shops, because what I was doing here was very counter to what the floral industry was doing.
Right.
So just really attacking it at a different point of view, 100%. And
Hitting on that real quick about, so you went back into a job. Did they recruit you, or did you seek them out?
they recruited me.
So that's what's interesting, and that's what I wanted to hit on is I think every entrepreneur is always looking for really good talent. And I think when they look for certain other people, and I think this is something you want to be careful as an entrepreneur, because the last thing you want to do is take an entrepreneur and unless you're going to pay them really well and hold them, they're always going to be looking for their thing that they want to do and their baby. I guess what I'm trying to drive home here, and I'm just trying to land the plane here, what I'm trying to say is I see it with people all the time where they have an entrepreneur spirit, but then they'll have another entrepreneur that's a little bit more seasoned than them, and they will always try to pick them up and put them into the manufacturing mindset. Like, I can use you, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I see Jeff. I can use you. How do I get you in my corner? And I think, and they will always try to do that because they're entrepreneurs, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but they see the value in what you're doing.
I was sitting excuse me, I was sitting in I think I was in Chicago airport, and I get a phone call from the owner of this company that we had sold, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm in Chicago. At that point, I was doing some marketing and business development for a flower importer in Miami. Well, I figured out what was next.
This is big business stuff, yeah.
And
this is wild.
He calls me up and he says, every single time I've asked who created this or how did this happen, he says, all the fingers are pointing at you. And he says, I just bought the company and you're not here. And he says, he says, we need to sit down. So, this was a Monday, I think. And I think by Wednesday I was, in Des Moines, Iowa, sitting in a conference room with this company saying, we got to have you here. So on the way home, my wife made me promise, we're not moving out of state. And on the way home, it's like, we're moving out of state.
That's hilarious.
So as a matter of fact, I think when I called her when I was back at the airport, I think her first words were, please don't tell me we're moving out of state. So.
What's cool about Michelle, what I know about her, is I think it's because of her past and her parents, or was there grandparents, the optometrist?
Grandparent.
What's cool about that is I think she knows, and she even has this background who she is, where she wants to support the decisions when it comes to. I think she lives in that a little bit. Like, she loves that a little bit too, like that, or no.
100%. She's 100% an entrepreneur, right? But at this point, she's running a very successful marketing company.
Right.
At this point, which here again, when I was a journeyman die maker, I allowed her to go build her business, and then I'm trying to grow this other floral company,
right,
and not taking dirt for a paycheck, because we're investing in a different way, right?
Right.
And thus, here again, now she's funding, my ability to go do this.
Right.
So nonetheless, I will say that even though I ended up back at this company, and even though it ended up, it's a story in and of itself, but the gentleman committed suicide and the whole thing was gone,
Yeah, you told me that story. That's
shortly
a wild
thereafter.
story.
It's a podcast in itself.
Right.
But nonetheless, working for a $22 million company, it might not be a Fortune 500 company, but it is a much larger company than anything I'd have worked for. Right.
Big scale.
Is a much grander scale, and to come on as director of operations taught me things and got me so outside of my comfort level, because I'd never been there before, right? I mean, it was myself and my wife, and it was never, hey, there's we need to do some continuing education, and, we need to teach these other 5 states worth of shops how to be more successful by being more, and teaching them how to run a company more like we were running here in Grand Rapids, and really very a different way to run a floral company. So it was not going to be comfortable to them, and so we're doing.
You're telling me doing something different? It's not always
we're doing these bi-yearly meetings where we're flying everybody in, and I've got to lead this thing, right? So for someone who didn't grow up out of the box being a leader.
Yeah.
This is like way outside my comfort zone. Like I'd never even prior to that, I never even wrote an agenda of any form on paper before. And so
now you're forced to do it because you're flying people in.
Right.
Yeah.
And I accepted the opportunity to do this. Right. So I knew how to run this floral operation, but now we've got to train and teach and model it and lead, right? You know, so being a leader is it's a big deal in and of itself.
Right.
And so I was always grasping for how to be a leader. What does that look like?
So this is actually like, this was your transition of, I'm in entrepreneurship to now I'm leading people.
Right.
That's an interesting thing, because now you're trying to teach other people what you've done for your success.
And now you've got more eyes on you again, right?
Everybody's watching, because the more people, the more haters, the more everything.
They're all watching, and all of these florists that we were working with were successful florists that have done it since, these shops from the 1950s forward were running shops the way that floral shops ran, and now this young guy's coming in and telling them, your way's old and decrepit, and it's going to go away eventually, and there's a better way, right? So try to tell somebody that, and
because it's been working. Yeah. It has worked in the past. Maybe not now, but for them, they've seen success in what they were doing at some point.
And the majority of these shops were pretty big shops.
Right.
So it wasn't that, they still weren't seeing success. So, come in and tell these people that the world's changing.
Yeah.
And
I see it coming.
And, trying to change this. So it was a big stretching moment for myself.
Right.
So I here again, a tough time. There was very little sleep, and mostly because I'd spend all day long, if you will, working the job.
Right.
And I'd spend all night long either educating myself, preparing, or documenting the day before, because everything had to be documented, and I wasn't used to that.
Yeah.
Right? So I felt like this little guy behind the scenes, and it's like, man, if you all saw me at night, you'd go, seriously?
But your forte isn't sitting, and you're more of making action happen.
100%.
And I actually run into that myself personally. Even to this day, it's really hard for me to sit down, and I need people's help. And I really lean into people today to help me with the things, like, for instance, like even for this podcast, even like sending the email letting you want to understand what's going on. That is not my forte.
No.
It's hey, and that's why I'm so thankful for people like your parents that say, hey, I'm good at doing the task at hand. I'm not. And I need people, like, I'm good at task at hand. So I'm not good at I don't want to say details, because I'm very good at the details.
But we have our strengths, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was the kid in school that looked out the window the whole day.
Same here. Yeah.
Schools have less windows now for a reason.
No joke, yeah.
Because I stared out the window the whole day.
100%.
I was out
daydreamed
there.
like you would not believe.
I was out there somewhere.
Oh.
I needed to be out there.
I remember struggling with that and, like, wondering why I daydream so much, because I would be in a different world at times, just like thinking and imagining.
And I think that's an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, I think a lot of entrepreneurs grow up thinking, what is wrong with me?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
100%. I was actually doing that the other day, yesterday, matter of fact. I'm sitting there, and I came back into the studio today, and I was telling Derek, I was just and it was almost an overwhelming thought of an idea down to every detail in my mind of what a thing looked like and what I want to do. And I would love to share that with you afterwards. It's just like this idea behind something else I would like to do. But I think entrepreneurs, the issue they run into is they have so many ideas that they need people to say, okay, bring it in, first of all, and how do we actually, let's get this down on paper, or let's get the systems put in place. And yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
And I have an advantage. And you're somewhat in this spot also, but one of the advantages I have over your average entrepreneur is that my wife is my partner.
100%.
And my wife brings things to the table that, my strengths and her strengths go really well together.
Same,
And I think there's a lot of times the ability for her to temper my crazy brain. And then sometimes, even there, she's like, that is an insane idea.
I've heard that a few times.
Don't even think about it. And we still go down there, and now we've got some track record, right?
100%.
And she knows that my stupid ideas
Sometimes
are not
work.
necessarily so stupid.
100%.
Because I'm going to put my mind to it. And she's like, yeah, I knew you'd pull it off. It was a stupid idea. It was a great idea. But you pulled it off, right?
It's not, 100%. It's relatable. Yeah.
Because I'm willing to put the effort into it.
Yeah.
So it's more than just, oh, here's a great idea. All right, here's a great idea, and let's go do something about it, right?
And once your wife believes in you, and that's
For
one
sure.
thing that I think what you're saying is once your wife believes in you, you feel like, because I remember going in through this transition where I used to be worried a lot about decisions. And then one of the things my wife said to me was, she's like, and I never really thought about, but she is, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And she would say that. And some of these things, when I would get myself in these situations, I'd have to take it back. And I'm like, I start to realize, like, wow, that, we still have each other no matter what.
Yep.
And I think that's what and I think that's what helps you make bold risks, because
You can live on love.
You literally can.
You can.
Like, I literally say, and it sounds dumb, but things are just things. You don't have to have all this. Don't get me wrong. I like money. I do. It's nice having it. Like, okay, if you can go on a nice vacation. But I believe me and my family could be completely happy living anywhere. And in anything, long as we have each other, we can go to. I remember before we had money, we would enjoy even going to like simple things, free, playing disc golf, going to the parks. Now we go on vacations and we spend more money, but do I think that we had just as much fun doing some of the simple free things? And we know we can make a good time anywhere we go.
And I think that's I come from a different point of view a little bit.
Yeah.
I agree, but there's another point of view. My mom, growing up middle class, right? 5 kids.
Yeah.
Money didn't grow on trees, right? And so my mom, loved Jesus, loved us kids, was just an amazing mom. But she would say, I'm here to tell you. She says, rich people will say that money, you don't need money to make you happy.
Right.
And she says, I'm here to tell you it's a lie. Because she says money can buy happiness. She says, I'm here to tell you.
The thing is, I think it can ruin happiness. And then we can debate on that.
There's the whole contentment thing, right?
100%.
My mom was 1,000% content. So content. Mom was not healthy my whole life.
Right.
She died when she was 72 due to this, but mom couldn't get out of a chair. Mom was 99% confined to a chair. She was an amazing homemaker. She cooked. One of her gifts was cooking, and she'd stand at the counter, but she could hang on to the counter and she could cook. But mom couldn't walk very well.
Okay.
Or very far.
That's tough.
And so it gave her a different perspective,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And so mom was the most content person I'd ever met. But I also think she was an encourager to, different perspective. But she was an encourager to say, go do it.
Right.
Right? Like, go do it. And
so your mom, even though
best.
your parents grew up in, she realized, that's interesting, because they're the ones that came from working in manufacturing.
Right.
But now at this time further down in her life, she's like, go try things, go do and step out.
I think she was just an encourager that just go be purposeful with your life, right? And my mom was a huge cheerleader for myself. In general, she wanted. I think she saw my dream and wanted it to be successful for us, right?
Right.
And so, I say I've got a little different point of view. So here I'm working for this big floral company, right?
Right.
And to some degree feel like we've got the cat by the tail, right? I've got access to a private jet. My office is in the tallest building on the top floor, overlooking the city. I've got it all.
You're there.
I'm there, right? And we're killing it. I ended up hiring my wife as director of marketing for this for this company. And I really feel like we hit there. And then I get a call one morning and they can't find the owner of the company. Long story short, We're sitting 2 weeks prior to the financial crisis. They called his loans in.
So they're starting to call the loans.
So
like, hey,
the world doesn't know this yet, right? The world doesn't know. It's 2 weeks prior to the financial crisis that the world would know, but the banks know it. And the banks are starting to call loans in.
They want their money.
They need their money.
Yeah.
So things are going south, right? And nobody's got the sirens going yet, but they're calling loans due, and they called his loans due, as well as at that same time they realized not everything was kosher in his finances. And so...
Well, I think back then banks were giving money out, and they were very leveraged, and they were doing things.
And they were breaking rules.
They were breaking rules.
And he was taking advantage of those rules.
Hence financial crisis.
Right?
That's what we're going into.
He was taking advantage of those rules, and he was cash flowing, and all was good until it wasn't good. And he disappeared on a Thursday, and Monday morning, we're hunting for him, and they find him in a seedy hotel, and he'd taken like 6 bottles of Tylenol. Even still at that point, we still felt financial crisis hadn't hit yet, right? And so I'm driving home from Des Moines and call my wife and say, what do you want to do when we grow up, right?
Yeah.
This fails, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What's the next thing?
What's the next thing? And we had no idea what was on the horizon. And I had investors calling me saying, hey, do you want to buy the company back? What do you want to do? Because it was all gone. I mean, like 100% gone. And we get back to Grand Rapids, and I jump back into it, and it's, I'm going to go rebuild, right?
Right.
With no idea that the financial crisis was going to happen. And the second it happened, the entire, all the money dried up out there, and all the opportunity dried up out there. So my wife's, she had just closed her marketing company in Grand Rapids because we had hired her to run the marketing.
Life was looking good.
Yeah. So here I come back, I have no job. She has no company because we had closed it and got rid of all of the customers, and the financial crisis hits, right? So we go from, a huge income. We had gone from push, invest into this company.
We're there.
That we sold. It wasn't panning out fantastic for us. But when I accepted the job to go lead this company, I said, all right, people, I need my buyout from, because the whole buyout thing was still taking place. But I said, I need my money out of this other company.
All right.
And so that money was coming in October, and the owner killed himself in July. So we never saw a penny. We lost the Floral company in Grand Rapids, and I never saw my payoff for that company when he bought it.
Your world's collapsing
so
at this point.
Literally, absolutely, my world caving in. It's like at a rate insanely, right? We went from, everything to nothing. So much so that the company car that I was driving that I assumed was paid for as one of my perks.
Yeah.
It was, middle of the day, one day, a wrecker comes and hooks up to it and takes it away.
That's
insane. And it's like, I went out and talked to the wrecker. I said, what are you doing? He said, dude, no one's ever paid a payment on this car. I've been driving it for 3 months.
And you have no idea.
I had no idea. So I'm sitting here. Now the financial crisis is here. I'm carless. Thankfully, my wife had a car.
Now it's starting to paint this picture for me of why you went back into business for yourself where you can control it.
Well,
it's starting to kind of come clear where we're going to come back to that. Yeah.
So here we are. We're stinking penniless.
Right.
Right? I mean, so...
You're lucky if you even be able to kind of eat.
No, right? There were... Literally, it was so difficult that we had an opportunity in the summers of like 2009, 2010, and 2011. We had the opportunity to send our kids to camp for the summer. And and the camp, because it was a camp that catered mostly to kids in distressed areas, both in Chicago and Detroit. So at-risk kids, and they didn't have enough kids to run the camp, and they needed more kids, and so they were paying for anybody that would be willing to fill a seat, so they had enough bodies to keep the camp open. So they said, we'll pay for the kids if they're willing to come.
You're like opportunity.
So instead of coming for a week, they went for, they'd come home on the weekend, but they were there for the whole summer. Well, we knew they had food.
That's unbelievable.
We knew they had food.
That's like, and you guys are hearing what entrepreneurship's about. I mean, there's home. Times that this, yeah, absolutely.
And here again, at that point, entrepreneurship wasn't necessary. I mean, I was forging forward, but entrepreneurship wasn't as much on our minds as survival.
100%.
At this point, right? And maybe we're using our entrepreneurial skills to survive, but I mean, jobs weren't out there.
No.
In any way, shape, or form.
Well, interesting is now we're in a different world. I remember during that time, I was coming up from manufacturing into real estate. So things actually during that time were pretty good for me at that, to be honest with you. And today, where you can't even get a builder to come to your house because they're so busy, I remember I was paying builders just to be able to keep them employed, to come over to my house, and they were just working around my house for minimum wage. Because so it's just crazy how like times shift, and now you look at like back then and compared to, it's just interesting, and it could happen to any of us at any time.
Right.
And you can't control it.
And you don't necessarily always see it coming, right?
You don't.
Because we did not see it coming.
Right.
We just did not. We had a little like bowl, a little terracotta pot in our front porch that was growing little lettuce mixed greens, and I am not joking when we'd go out with the scissors and cut off the biggest, of the greens to make a salad.
That's amazing.
And try to save the rest for another day.
But that's made you who you are too.
So for sure, right?
Right.
And, and we realized as we got deeper into this, it's like we need, I called, my old business partner from our old Floral company, right? And said, we need to start another shop. We got to go create an income.
Right.
And he's like, sayonara, dude. He's
I want nothing to do with this.
Nothing to do with it, right? Because it left a bad taste in our mouths, right?
Absolutely, naturally. Yeah.
So I spent the next, we dragged our hide for the next couple years as I worked day and night at home on the technology that runs our company today.
That's interesting.
And in some ways...
Is it your own software, or what is it?
It's our own software, yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
So, interestingly enough, the software was revolutionary in the floral industry, and it changed the industry as it is today, except there's no credit on our behalf because the world could see what we were doing, but a lot of the world was much better funded than ourselves.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we created, there were companies out there that picked up the ball, and they had more programmers and more dollars, and but to this day, the world is a different place from a technology standpoint. Technology did not exist in the floral industry.
Right.
And so we introduced technology, legitimately, in the way that flowers are bought and sold, and, those types of things. And in the wedding industry, technology, everybody was watching what we were doing.
Right.
And, but, bottom line, we got a couple years in, and it's like, we have to launch another company, right?
Okay.
We're an entrepreneur. We need a job. We need money.
Right.
Living on love was not feeding the family.
Right.
It just wasn't. And
your kids are the campus.
And at this time, that's when, in the low times of running a company, right? When you're at the bottom of the barrel, that's when both voices in your own head and the voices around you, even all the way down to my mom, whom was, my, biggest cheerleader. It's like, you need to go
work at McDonald's, go get a job.
Literally go to work at McDonald's.
Right.
And it's like, but you don't understand. You know, I was getting at that point, I was getting $362 a week,
Right.
you know, with unemployment, and McDonald's didn't pay that.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, and nobody's handing out full-time jobs. You can only get like a part-time job working for almost nothing.
Oh, yeah, right.
And it's like, there isn't McDonald's jobs.
Right.
You know, unemployment at that point was paying more. And so we went just headlong into, we're starting over.
We see the vision of where we want to go.
We see the vision. And I finally,
Which is scary.
you know, I was watching a property, which is our current, you know, Stim's Market property in Granville. And I was watching a property that had been vacant for years. And I finally called the number on the door.
With no money.
Zero money.
So you have an idea, but you have nothing going for you at the moment.
Absolutely no money.
Yeah.
Our adjusted gross income in 2009 was like $16,900 with 5 kids.
That's
Or was it 5? I don't, not 5 kids at that point, but
that's wild.
but yeah, you know, so it went from, you know, huge to literally nothing.
But you have an idea.
And it was more than an idea. It was a drive. We're going to do this. and I called this number, and the gentleman that owned the building to this day is just the most inspiring entrepreneur that I've ever met. Just an amazing gentleman. I had lunch with him in Grand Rapids a couple weeks ago. He's in his 90s.
That's amazing.
And he is still pushing it and inspirational. And, you know, I sat down with him, and, you know, at lunch, he's like, Jeff, he says, when I met you and when I took a chance on you, he says, I wasn't worried because I could see the tenacity and the drive.
100%.
And he said, with that much tenacity and drive, I know you're going to make it. And so he took a risk on me and leased me the building.
Right.
So much so that no money. And I had a tax refund coming. And, you know, interestingly enough, you know, we had been unemployed, and when you don't make any money, I don't know, my tax refund, I don't remember how many thousand it was, but it was like
pretty good. Yeah.
Like I felt like I got money back because, you know, I paid taxes on everything, but I got it all back because I wasn't making any money. And so we used those dollars to get the company launched, right? You know, albeit however small it was.
So you had zero. Did he give you free rent for a little bit, or how did that look?
Like,
how did you pay your first month rent? Like, how did that work?
So at that point, my to-be business partner, I went to him, and finally he gave me a call, you know, and said, you know, fine, I'll come on board. I can't find a job anyways.
Right.
So he came on board, and between the two of us, we scratched enough money together to, you know, get the place renovated. Right. And, you know, somewhat put together. We did meet with a bank at one point.
Doing a lot of the work yourself.
Did everything ourselves.
Right. So it's not like you're paying.
We sat down with a bank, and the bank's like, you got to understand, this is a whole different world. Like, we'll loan you $1 if you have $1. And we didn't have $1.
Right.
So at that point, you know, we did 100% of everything ourselves. Every piece of drywall, every drop of paint, you know, built everything from scratch. But I'm a journeyman tool and die maker, right? It's like, I can do this.
Right, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
you know, I can build it. So we built out the store, we got it open, and we weren't very long into it, and we weren't paying bills. And the gentleman who leased us the building, you know, sat down and talked with him, and he says, you're going to make it. He says, but here's what
There's something different about this guy.
Big time, right? So he's been there, right?
Was he self-built?
Yes, 100%.
So that makes sense, because what I find a lot, and this isn't picking on second generation or third generation, because obviously I'm not picking on them, but typically first generation understands the sacrifice and that is needed to get to where you're going, and they understood that a passion can get you really far.
Yeah.
If you have the passion and desire to and that I think that's again what we're looking for in other people. We're looking for those people, and that's where that one guy actually took you, because he's seen you have a passion and desire, and he put you under payroll instead of having you in his own business. But this guy's seen it and is like, I'm here, and I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was successful at this time when he's helping you, and he's like, I know that he just seen it in you. I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
When he was 19 years old, the gentleman's name was Ray Loshner, and if you've been in Granville, you'll see the little miniature golf place out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of rough looking these days. But when he was 19 years old, he built that miniature golf thing to put himself through college.
That's amazing.
So he put it, and he did. He put himself 100% through college with that, and then went on to be, he's a behemoth.
Yeah.
Wildly more wildly successful than I can even begin to imagine.
Right.
Should hope to be someday.
Right.
But
he's seen something in you.
So he saw something. So he saw something, and he's like, all right. He's like, here's what you need to do. He says, don't pay rent for the next year.
That's unbelievable.
And he said, I'll give you 3 years after that to pay it off. And he says, well, we'll throw some interest on there. But he says, do not pay rent for the next 12 months.
Wow.
And that investment, because he's like, I'm an investor at that point, right?
100%.
And he was smart. And at first when he said it, after we got it paid off, he reminded us at one point, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me.
Right.
But I think that reality check was really good.
I think so too.
Right? Absolutely. I think it was really good. And it felt a little harsh.
You need people, you need help.
It felt harsh, but like we wouldn't exist without him.
That's a fact.
And so just joy to sit down.
But he didn't give you a handout.
No.
He didn't hand out anything to you. He
no.
gave you a hand. It was a lesson as a hand up.
No. There was documentation that we signed on. Right?
Yeah. There was no.
We signed our life away.
He's right. You wouldn't be there if it was without him. But I think what I like about. And it's true, is I don't think any time, I'm a firm believer, and I might catch grief from people, I don't think typically giving anybody anything ever helps them. It actually hurts them most of the time. Now, I think helping them, what I mean by that is, he essentially gave you a loan and saying, okay, I'm going to give you opportunity. I think that's the thing we got to look for the most. Is there opportunity for everybody? And in this case, he's like, I'm going to give you...
When it comes to entrepreneurship, for sure, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned first generation, second generation. We've all seen second generation come into a successful, vibrant company, and a few years later it's gone,
100%.
right? Because they didn't have the skill, they didn't have the drive, the knowledge, the wisdom. They knew nothing about...
To go through the pain, yeah.
They knew nothing about what it took to get there, thus they couldn't hold it, and thus they didn't have the drive to take it anyplace. Right? But that first generation drive is...
I can't feed my kids, I got to send them to camp feel.
Right.
That's what gets you to where you're going.
So...
Yeah.
From there, it's just raw tenacity, right? You just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And you've got to, there's so much, there's so many people that are going to say, you can't do that.
Right.
Why are you choosing the hard way?
Right.
Why? Just
go to work. You have tool and die experience, just go to work.
Go do it like everybody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I wasn't so I'm all that. When the world started looking a little bit better, I worked a few overnight shifts at the dye shop when they were in over their head, busy. And it's like, you know what? I'll sell flowers by day, and I'll pay bills on the overnight.
Right.
We never slept.
Right. Yeah.
To get where we want to go.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It was worth it. And
then how did that turn out? So he gives you a year. And then I think this was the time that I think I've even watched you. I think you started even doing things on YouTube. You started, didn't you? Is that during that time, where you were doing?
So the we grew the company, and then everybody at the same time got hit with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And, so here again, we had just gone through our best year ever. And, we're finally getting, we feel like we're getting some legit traction and pulling ourselves together. And then COVID comes and there's nothing. Our doors are closed, for a time, right? And we order our flowers, months, weeks in advance. And so even after our doors are closed, in this case, we still had 3 weeks worth of flowers coming.
Yeah.
And all the bills with it. And like, we can't sell them. We tried to sell them in the parking lot. We got shut down. Like, we've got all this stuff. What are we going to do?
Because you got to make it happen. So you're figuring out any way you can do it.
Right. So we've got employees. What in the world are we going to do? So we're shut down. We're at home. And so we decided, okay, we're going to, for lack of better words, we're going to make lemonade with our lemons, right?
Yeah.
And we had our little Volkswagen, microbus.
Yeah.
And we started by taking the first week's worth of flowers. And, we as a family, for the most part, sat and made vases that we called sunshine vases. The van was yellow. And we made sunshine vases. And we made sunshine vases because even though the sun was shining, nobody could see it.
Right.
Nobody could see it. Everybody could only see COVID and the negative results of it, right?
Right.
And so when the sun's shining and you can't see
crumbling,
it, let's go share some sunshine.
That's good.
And so we jumped in the van and we jumped on Facebook Live, totally out of our, we're trying to navigate and do live, and we'd really never, we were on Facebook, but we'd never done anything like that before.
And that's when I think locally people started noticing.
So we went on a live feed and we said, okay, people, tell us where your grandma and grandpas are, because we're going to deliver them flowers. And so we spent the entire day, it was like an 8-hour live. And
that's pretty awesome.
We had the entire back of the van filled with vases, and we went from one grandma and grandpa's, this home and that retirement facility. And we just kept, my grandma lives on whatever. So, off we go and we drove for the entire day, and we got rid of, an entire,
van full of flowers.
like 1,000 square foot cooler full of flowers.
That's insane.
We delivered.
But it's true. You took a negative situation, and it's still negative kind of for you because you're not making money.
No.
But you're like, I understand the value in people. That's what I'm hearing. In your community. That's what I'm hearing. So okay. So, what do you do? What do you do when the bottom drops out? Right? So, because the bottom's going to drop out. It did.
And maybe your bottom isn't going to be as low as my bottom. And I would pray that that's never the case.
I mean, you never know. Nobody knows.
But the world does this, right?
Absolutely.
And when you're down here, what are you going to do? And we realize it's like, all right, so we've got an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's opportunity, not the negative, whatever your brain could tell you.
Right.
So we've got an opportunity here to do something big.
Yep.
So it's like, how are we going to keep our customer base? Everybody's got shopping habits. How are we going to keep our customer base while we're closed? How are we going to bring them back?
Right.
So it's like, let's take this product, and then subsequently, what we did after that, and let's go sow into the world. Like, it's got value, right?
Yeah.
And so, who would do that?
Yeah.
And so the first week we did sunshine vases. The second week we did sunshine vases and donuts. So we went to every donut shop in town and we bought 24 donuts because companies are trying to stay. Yeah. They can still be open, but they didn't have any customers either.
Right.
So we went to every single donut shop in town and we bought 24 donuts. And then we went back on the live feed with stacks of donuts and vases, and we said, okay, now we're going to focus on small business.
Right.
How can we encourage small business? So people would say, hey, my family owns a whatever shop, and we would go and we would deliver them flowers and donuts.
Right.
And we just did this all over town, here again, for a whole long day.
Because at this time, I don't think a lot of people they're not thinking about bringing joy to other people. They're just trying to survive.
Right.
And you're showing up like, hey, I'd like to believe that my family, I like to believe this, can take the worst situation and make it enjoyable, right? Like that's kind of what you guys did. You took a really bad situation, right? Like
Sure.
You could have stayed home. You could have, but instead you're like, you know what? Let's go. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a mentality. Like I took a bad situation and we were just gonna make it good no matter what, even if it didn't make sense.
And you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity as an entrepreneur every single day to determine where you're going. And you can, so this morning, like I ran this morning, and you could ask me, how did it go? And I could say, I did it, my times were, a little slow.
Right.
Right? Or I could say,
I ran.
I stinking ran with the other 4 people, or other 2 people that I saw this morning at 5 o'clock this morning,
Right.
and we stinking killed it, right?
Yeah.
Because
The fact is, you ran at 5 o'clock.
most people are still in bed at 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's two ways to look at it.
100%.
I'm trying to train for a marathon, but 26.2 miles feels like a long ways away when I haven't run in years and years and years and years.
Right.
But I still ran this morning,
Yeah, 100%.
So
yeah, I love that.
you have that choice
of the way to think about it.
To way to think about it. So, so week 3, we were trying to figure out what to do with our flowers. So week 3, we took all of our flowers and we took them downtown to Spectrum Hospital to the bridge that goes across, from
Oh yeah.
From the parking ramp to the hospital.
Yeah.
Here again, you can't go into the hospital. You can't bring flowers into the hospital because we were trying to encourage doctors and nurses.
Right.
And we called Spectrum and they're like, we love it, but you can't bring those into our facility, right?
You're like, I get it. We'll figure it out.
We dropped them off. We dropped them off on a curb, and 2 girls lugged them all up and put them in this, bridge. And all the doctors and nurses just had a free-for-all, on their way to and from work, with the flowers. So we're done with week 3. Now we've got no more flowers. What are we going to do the next week? How are we going to keep the customer base? So we started a, sort of, if you will, podcast. We started a 3 o'clock coffee time with Jeff and Michelle.
I love that.
And
I started hearing chirping about that.
And we had
people.
no flowers to show off. So I cook, but I don't bake. So I took up baking, for our customers. And we just had a ball with, I would explain what I'm baking on the beginning of the week. And on Friday, we'd drink coffee and eat dessert in front of them of whatever I baked.
I will have to plug them on this. I got one of your cookies in that box for the gifts exchange. When he says he bakes, this isn't basic. Like he is unbelievable baker. So
I'll things.
I'll plug you there. Those cookies were some of the best cookies to this day that I've ever had. So
tell them I'm going to make cutout cookies of, I'm a tool and die maker, right?
Yeah.
So I'm out we got nothing but time on our hands.
Right.
So like we were building content 24 hours a day just for this 3 o'clock live feed. So I'm out in the backyard, in the back garage, with metal and my welder making, cutout cookies of, the Stems logo and a goat in a Volkswagen van and,
That's
all
awesome.
the things. And by the end of the week, showing off, middle of the week showing off the cookie cutters. And by the end of the week,
that's amazing.
Showing off the cookies and so forth, right?
Right.
And so we did this 3 o'clock live feed, and people had nothing to do. So, we would come on, or we would start getting messages from people saying, hey, I've got my coffee brewed, let's go.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's cool.
And so we had this huge following, and I'm sure there's a million companies that, that had these huge followings
Right.
of, being able to, have one-on-one time, with your customer base, and just our whole goal with it was sharing joy.
Right.
And to some degree, that's our absolute, mission and goal to this day. I got a band here that says sharing kingdom joy. So our goal is to share kingdom joy.
So I know one thing when I think about everything you've ever done, and all from what I know about you, one of the things I do want to hit on in this episode is your personal brand. I think that means that's like a big deal when I see Jeff Drake, everything from the van that you drive wrapped in your brand, from I don't think I've ever seen you with something besides a floral shirt on, to like caring about people. Everything comes down to who you are and your identity. But I wouldn't say flowers are your identity, but I think it also, you embrace it in everything you do, and I think that is your identity. I'd like to hit like...
It's my company, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of diving into like personal brand and who you are, like what makes you decide like, I see other people that own like other businesses and they're not doing the things that you're doing. And I think you have a passion, necessarily not for flowers, but for being all in on the thing that you do.
Yeah.
So
and you'll understand this, but like you've called me out before by saying like, dude, why are you always like counting time, or why are you always like, right? I don't remember how you said it, but like,
yeah,
you're and I would, how did that? I'm speaking of life. I'm speaking of I've only got like days to live kind of thing, and you're like, dude, come on, you're not that old,
Right.
Right?
Yeah, because I mentioned it about like real estate at one point, and I was like, hey, just like talking about certain ideas, and you make it seem like, yeah, absolutely.
And, you're speaking of you're going to do 1,000 things, and I've got like one thing left before I die, kind of thing, right? So, and to some degree, there's that death talk, right? So, invest in your life, invest in death, and so we know the tongue is a big deal. Right. So we'll talk about that. But for myself, I'm not as young as you are. Right. Reality. And we've been through some stuff, right?
Right.
And so if you take my cumulative knowledge and wisdom and all of that stuff and wrap it all together and say, A, I want to retire someday. Right. And B, Michelle and I, our goal is, ultimately to have a foundation.
Right.
And, and we want to have a foundation that shares kingdom joy. So that's our goal. Okay.
Right.
That's the ultimate, that's what we want to do. So we have this,
but you have done that. I've heard, I know people that knew you 20 years ago, and you've changed their life because of that mentality. It's
sure.
Who you are.
Well, it is. It is. Ultimately, that's who I am, and that's who we are, right? And we want to, double, triple down on that. And we have the ability, and partially because of who I am is my makeup, and partially because of what we've gone through, is that I have the ability to see those people that are in need, that are right around us.
Right.
I can see it. The people that are in need and hiding in the shadows, I can see it. The underdog, I can see it. Right. And so whereas I don't have the ability myself to, provide water for life, for countries that have water, I can run a marathon and I can do my part.
Right. Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
And I can't solve poverty in Granville and Grand Rapids, but what I can do is keep my eyes open, and we can see some of those people that fall through the cracks, and we can jump in and help those people.
That's good.
Okay, and so and STEM's market does that on a daily basis, and Michelle and I do that on a daily basis, and somewhat surgically.
So you don't have to be there to. I think when people they're always waiting for the next best thing to be able to help, and you're like, and you can do it now.
So the gentleman that's across the street from us that's been there on a 90-degree day, all day long, cooking in the sun, you don't have to ask yourself, dude, do you have something to drink or eat? Because he doesn't.
Right. Hey, you just can see it. You've been watching him all day long.
Watching him all day long cook. So you go and say, a rhetorical, stupid question. Dude, have you had anything to eat or drink today?
Yeah.
And they look at you like, what a stupid rhetorical question, right?
Right. It's like, here's some drink. Yeah,
in this case, I didn't have anything to drink, but I had cash. Right. And, he perked up, and no doubt he went and got himself something to eat and drink, right? I didn't solve his life's problems.
No, you filled the need.
But there was a need in front of us that we needed to take care of.
Right.
And we've had so many of those needs.
I just get frustrated. Me personally, I get frustrated with the people that say I'm waiting for tomorrow to do a thing that I can do today. And we're always waiting. I see people do it with, like, I think having kids. I think I see it with people that pour into kids. Well, I can tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. And it's like, you can do it today.
So tomorrow might not happen.
Tomorrow might not happen.
Tomorrow might not happen. And one of the pivotal items in my life some years ago is we had a cancer scare. And we thought I had cancer. And we went 16 weeks thinking we had cancer until they gave us ultimately gave us an all clear. But 16 weeks is a long time to
100%.
meditate on, wow, what
would happen?
What does end of life look like?
Right.
And we made some promises at that time, and you get clarity, right? So, even though we live, hopefully a long time, right? Our days are finite. Our days are numbered. And so me sitting, in a little different situation, with the life stuff that I've gone into, we have made the decision to make every minute of life purposeful.
Right.
Okay? So you say, why are you the way you are? You want to see what I look like on Saturday? Here's what I look like today. This is what I look like on Saturday.
Yeah.
If you see me on 7 days a week, I'm the same person.
Right.
And I'm dressed the same way, unless I'm running.
Well, what's interesting about that is it's the people that I coach. That's one of the things I tell them to do. Is I tell them to plan what their funeral would look like. What are people going to say?
I'm not going that far yet.
Yeah.
But legacy's a big deal, right?
Yeah. What are people going to say? Who's going to show up? Is anybody going to show up to your funeral? Are you going to have a room full of people? Are they going to say that you were a caring person that would go and give somebody water? Or are they going to say that you would kick somebody when they're there? What would people say about Jeff Drake today if you did pass? Because I think what really stood out for me was I've had a lot of friends die at very young ages from everything from heart attacks to car accidents, right? And you start to look back and you start to be thankful for every day that you do have.
For sure.
And I think that's what gets me to take bigger risks, is because I realize that I have an opportunity that they didn't have.
Right.
Because they have passed. But going back down to age and kind of the age difference in you and I is one of the things that I do too. I say is I don't think age matters a ton, because the fact is I had friends that died before even, and that I'm older than they are today, that they didn't live the same amount of life. But I do think taking advice from people and making sure you're careful on advice, because one of the things that I do recognize is sometimes you'll take advice from an 80-year-old person. They've been through a lot of stuff.
They've been through it.
But sometimes they don't recognize that because they're 80, that they're playing a different game than you're playing at the age of 20. Right? If you're 20 years old, you're playing a different game, and you can take a little bit more risk than somebody that says, I just need to make sure that I'm not... I think there's two different games. Now, you can take advice from them, saying you should absolutely take advice for 80-year-old. But I think you need to watch what they're saying and saying, okay, I have a life ahead of me that I can make some mistakes and I can rebound from it, compared to somebody that maybe at 60, 70, 80 years old.
For sure.
Right.
So legacy plays a huge piece, and in my case, in age. But what I'm doing makes sense for any entrepreneur, right?
Absolutely.
Like if here again, if I told you if I went all the way back to the beginning, it'd play out differently, right? Because here's a big key factor for, we'll get back to brand, but here's a monstrous key factor for an entrepreneur, okay? And you don't understand it till you understand it, but it is huge. I think it's the number one thing that I've learned. You have more control over your future than what you think you do.
That's good. That's powerful.
So you do. So here's the thing. Life and work and business and, customers throw things at you and outside forces and COVID and everything's throwing stuff at you, and you have a choice. You have a choice to say, man, those are the cards that I was dealt.
Right.
Or you can, I'm on Chicago Drive and I can call my wife and say, we've got to get a show. Like I'm done trying to pacify everybody that wants me to go to McDonald's. We've got to go get another company started. Like bingo, that's what we got to do. Right? Because we've tried everything and we're not putting food on the table, right? And it's like, there is nothing out there. We're going to go full ahead on, and I'm going to stink and go call a number. So I was on Chicago Drive. I was on a turnaround. I called her, and I drove down the street and called the number.
And some of that stuff is you heard the voice, right? You heard something inside you that said, hey, I think God's guiding you. And
yes, 100%. But the one thing that we realized is that I have so much control. I can't control whether I get cancer. I can't control whether I lose that big client. I can't control. There's so much I can't control, right?
Right.
But what I can control is what I do with that information, right? I couldn't control COVID.
This is huge.
I couldn't control it.
No.
But what I could control is I've got 1,000 square foot cooler that's going to have thousands and thousands of dollars of rotted flowers in there. How are we going to make this benefit us?
Right.
Like how are we going to use this?
In everything.
How are we going to turn this into opportunity? Now we've got no flowers. Now there's absolutely nothing. How can we?
Now we're baking.
Right. But how? Yeah. And so the goal was, how can we keep our customer base engaged in a conversation with us while we're not there? Right? So we had the opportunity. I can't control the world around me.
Yep.
But I could control what my actions are in relationship and my response to it, and my response to be choose, it seems stupid, but choose joy.
Yeah.
Choose joy and choose to see the sunshine when it's not shining.
Right.
Because I'm here to tell you, there was no money flowing, and the bills are still racking up, right?
You're like, I don't know what's going to happen.
So you put a smile on your face, and you run after it. You have the ability to control. Someone says, I have no idea what to do. We're going to go down. No.
Yeah.
I mean,
choose joy. I like that.
Flip it.
Yeah.
And say, what can I do? So part of what you can do when you're like in the bottom is go invest into somebody else.
100%. I love that.
Put your eyes on somebody else. Because what that does is, and I don't understand it, but when you put your eyes on somebody else, it feeds you.
Yeah.
It feeds you, and it lifts you up. It didn't change your situation. And it didn't change your surroundings, but it changed the trajectory of where you're going, okay?
And I think it also takes it and realizes that the fact is we're all entitled on some level. And you realize that there's people out there that always have it worse than you.
100%.
And you start to realize you're like, and it's not, I don't know if this sounds weird and I'll just be vulnerable, but it's like, once you realize like, I have it bad, but they have it much worse. It's all perspective. And you can do it the other way. You could have said, I have it bad at times in your life, but they have it much better.
And you can look at that person and say, let me give you 10 points to fix your life. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, let me solve your world's problems for you.
Yeah.
But then turn it around and say, wait a minute. Let's focus here, and let's give ourselves our 10 points. And so what are we going to do? We're going to choose joy.
Right.
Number one. and we're going to, invest in other people and let it build you up. And then we're going to put a plan together, and we're going to move.
Yeah, I
right?
love it. Yep.
So that's where the brand comes from. Okay? So the brand comes from, it's this evolution. It's evolutionary, right? And it's being purposeful. And I have no idea, where I'm going to go with this ultimately, right? But what I do know is by making every step purposeful and going, if I've got today, let's not talk about the future.
Yeah.
But if I've got today, what am I going to do today? What's the most benefit that I can accomplish for my business?
And you go all
today.
in on it.
And so you go all in on it. So you do crazy things. You buy, in my case, it started slow. I started drinking out of an orange coffee cup, and then, I've got orange glasses. And then my first 6 shirts came off a clearance rack for $6, $6.35 or something stupid at Express.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then, but then as you start building, as you start going all in on this and on your brand, that you're in the right spot when your customers are regurgitating your brand back to you.
Yeah.
And so like our customers are like, hey, are you going to be there at 3:00 in the Sunshine Bus? I didn't name it the Sunshine Van.
Yeah.
They named it the Sunshine Van, right?
Sense of community.
And Sunshine Vases, do you have sunshine vases available every day? It's like, no, free vases are not available every day.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to make money too. I'm trying to,
we're trying to run a business here.
Yeah.
But the reality is they're regurgitating that brand back.
Yeah.
And so as you start realizing I have more control than what I think I do, right? So therefore I keep going all in on the brand.
Yeah.
And so where I want to provide clean water and fundraise for World Vision,
I think you chose it because it was orange.
I also want to get myself out of bed in the morning, and rather than go straight to work at 4:30 in the morning, which is what I normally do, it's like, you know what? I need to back off a little bit, and I need to have balance, right? Even more balance, and personal health matters.
Right.
Right? So I'm getting out of bed, and I'm hoofing it on the ground, burning my lungs out. And you've mentioned this before too, but you feel good afterwards.
100%.
You feel actually completely beat, but nonetheless.
Yeah. But you're glad you did it. Yeah.
You are glad you did it, and it builds you up. Right?
At the I bet you never say at the end of what you do that you ever so you run. That's hard. It's hard to run. You're exhausted. I bet you never regret it.
No.
Ever. It's the same thing with going through hard things in business. You never regret anything. It's just a life is a process.
And regret is a bad thing.
I agree.
So regret, I don't want to be 80 or 90, and regret, I could have.
I agree.
Right?
I'm in the same boat.
I could have. What if I would have helped more people? What if I would have double, tripled down on myself? So where I'm not a natural leader, I have the ability to say, okay, what does 100% times 2 look like of me, whether the world likes it or not, and let's go be that.
Right.
Right?
That's good.
Let's go be that. Because I'm going to go 1,000% in. Someone says, why in the world on Saturday are you wearing a flower dress? A flower dress, wow. Dress like a flower shirts. There you go. I'm not wearing a flower dress, people. That's not going in quite that far.
No, not that far.
At least not today. But
your wife maybe.
But why are you doing that? Why?
Right.
And it's like you don't have the perspective I have.
Yeah, you don't live in my world.
You don't live in my world, and I'm putting everything in every day into not just to get rich, but do I want to I've got 30 some employees. Do I want to provide a good paycheck to them?
You want to be the guy that says, I'll cut your rent for a year because I believe in you.
I want to take care of my people, right?
Right.
And I want to invest into the people around me that don't have the ability, and they're hiding in the shadows and they need some help. I want to be there for those people. But at this point in time in my life, it's like I'm going in all day long, all night long, 24 hours a day, 100% of the time, and just giving it everything I've got.
To life,
right?
Not necessarily one specific, just
100% life.
Just
no,
life.
I'm doubling down on. I want to be a better dad.
Yep.
I want to be a better husband, right? So
Preach it. I like it.
So I love spending time with my wife, and I love taking her on a date night.
So this goes into one of the questions I like to ask everybody. If you were to look back, what would you give advice to people that say, hey, I'm going into your industry. I'm going to go into the flower industry. I'm going to go into entrepreneurship. What advice, because I think it's almost going to be the same answer, I think, that you were going to hit on with your wife. What advice would you give young people that are entrepreneur spirit, they're unsure of, like, double downing on themselves? Like, what advice would you give them?
Don't quit. First thing, don't quit. You're going to have to know that it's work.
Right.
Right? And that's that whole invest or not invest.
Right.
Right?
Invest in the unknown.
It's an unknown. It's 100% unknown. You don't know. You don't know if the company you just started is going to make it.
Right.
Right? You don't know. But even if that first company does not make it, it does not mean that the next one won't.
Right.
Right? So
right.
It's gonna take perseverance. But at the same token, like everybody talks about the hustle. I gotta hustle. And I mentioned a minute ago, balance. I realized some years ago when we were running our marketing company, and we'd have the president of a corporation say, I need this on my desk Monday morning.
Right.
And so we worked 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to have, this marketing plan on a table or whatever whatever they're hunting for. And then Monday morning would come and we'd get a phone call saying, the president of the company's out of town till Thursday. Can we meet then? And it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right?
I just wasted my life.
Like we didn't take care of the family. We didn't take care of our health. We gave up absolutely everything for no gain.
Right.
And so we realized back then, it's like, no, don't get me wrong. You're going to see me working on Saturdays, and our flowers come in on Sunday evening, so I'm going to work a little bit. But for the most part, you're not going to see me working and burning the brain on Saturday and Sunday.
Because you got your priorities lined up correctly.
And it's so much better.
Yeah.
Like you will destroy your company without balance.
100%.
You need a family.
This is good.
You need a wife.
Yeah.
You need that relationship.
You need to work out. You need
to work out. You need those things in your life, or probably every single person you sit here is gonna talk about work-life balance, and it's not, outside of the entrepreneurial world. It's like, well, I just want my own business so I can just, sit on a sunny island and do whatever I want. I'm here to tell you that's not what happens.
No. And
that's not what happens.
You're not happy
even
doing
if you
that.
are sitting on the sunny island, you're working. Your brain is moving, and like you're lining it up so that when you get back, you're hitting the ground.
Well, it's
right?
funny because I have taken vacations 2 weeks and a little bit over before, and as I'm Caribbean island, right? You'll be on something like that, and I think if you're an entrepreneur, you can only what's the word I'm looking for? Like where you're giving to yourself and you're always like pouring. There's a point where you need to do things for other people. You can only satisfy yourself so much where you're like, this is what I want to eat today. I want to go and go on this hike today. I want to go.
One Oreo cookie is amazing with milk. By the time you get to the end of that whole package, it's not so good anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Eventually you're like, I need to do something for other people. I can't just keep yourself always. And I think that's the same thing as that's what we're all working towards. So we think we want to be on this Caribbean island where we're sitting in the fan and we do nothing. And I hear people. I was actually talking to somebody the other day. They're like, "That's what I want to do. I want to retire." And I see people they'll live their whole life miserable. I have a friend right now.
Miserable.
They have a job that they hate. They're doing the right things. They're maxing out their Roth IRAs. They're doing everything exactly how they're supposed to do it. And the world. Because they can retire at 65, but they're going to live their first 30 years with their kids and their family that they absolutely cannot stand their lives. Could you imagine? Then that to me sounds like hell.
Yeah, you right. Your goal is to get the kids out of the house so you can go serve self,
Yeah.
And then find out that you have a whole long life in front of you.
Right.
And you're bored out of your mind.
You're bored out of your mind because you didn't pour into
Now, here again, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur to do something awesome with all those other years.
100%.
But serving self is hard.
Big time. It is. It's weird to think that. Yeah, but once you get to the core, it is hard. So
and it's destructive.
It's destructive. 100%. And you see it with these people sometimes that do, and it is destructive, and you actually start causing more harm than anything. 100% agree, because I think we're created for other people.
Yeah. So for me, Father's Day comes, and I'm taking my girl shopping.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's good.
Because at the end of the day, feeding into them feels so much better than getting 6 gifts and wondering, is that all there is?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest issues we're running into with these holiday seasons a lot, is it's so much, it's so routine. And I think these gifts that you give, now I think gifts are good, but I think it's so routine where you're shoving gifts down people's throats, where it's like, oh, I've even seen it where in my families, oh, here, Jeff, here's a $50 gift card. Oh, here's a $50. Oh, here's a $100. And it's just exchange. You're like, there's no purpose. I think a gift should be extremely and I think like when you take your girls out to get gifts on your birthday, I think that's huge. I think we all can learn something from that.
When you give to the point that you can feel the giving, that's when it becomes special, right?
Yeah, that's
right?
Good. Yeah.
Because if you give in a method that costs you absolutely nothing,
yep. Yeah.
I'm not saying you didn't benefit, but there's not. It's not going to benefit you and build you up and make you more of a giver.
I think you're 100% right, and I think that's the issue you run into is when people give and it doesn't cost them anything, and that's where the first generation, second generation, third generation, because the fact is 100%. You gave when your company was being crushed, and that did a lot for you, and it was because it cost you everything, but ultimately gave you everything.
Right.
Which is a weird thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain it.
And money, and it's not all about money, right?
It's not all about, it's very rarely about money.
So personal brand, I'm out there with my flowered shirts, the Sunshine Van, and, we're going to continue to proclaim joy because I want that to be my brand. Right.
Yes.
That's my ultimate.
That's good.
That's what I want to be my brand.
We hit it.
Proclaiming joy.
That's
right?
good.
So, and we're going to use all the different ways to do that. We've got some really cool stuff as a company coming up.
Yeah.
And so
always innovating, always doing
open.
something. Yeah. I love that.
Yep.
So we've talked about a lot. We could sit here and talk probably 4 more hours.
Sure. We'll do it over lunch.
I love it. We'll do that. If people want to get in touch with you, because you shared a lot of information today, and I can see people just wanting to get in touch with you to ask you questions. Is there a way people can get in touch with you, get information on your company? Like, how would people get in touch with you?
You could email me, jeff@stemsmarket.com.
Okay,
Super
Jeff.
easy.
And what's your website?
stemsmarket.com.
stemsmarket.com. So if you want to get in touch with Jeff, I'm sure that he would love to just be in touch with you. You can see his heart for community and people. So definitely highly recommend reaching out to him. And if you want to bless him, go stop at Stems and buy some flowers today. All right. So we have another section of our thing that we like to do, and that is our message in a bottle series that we do.
Yep.
So what we do is we'll have somebody put a message in the bottle from the last episode. It's our way of connecting the community of people that we have on the show, and we don't know what it says. We don't know what they wrote. So I'd be kind of curious on what they're gonna write, and you're gonna open that bottle up and you're gonna read it and you're gonna answer the question, and then you're gonna take a piece of paper from here, and then you're gonna write your next
a message
question
in the bottle.
Yeah,
So I'm grabbing this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Boy. Test. What failure in your life and or career has impacted you most?
So you've had a lot of them.
Oh, man. Yeah, boy. See, I can write the book on failure, right? And, sometimes self-imposed failure and sometimes failure that comes from the outside,
COVID.
right?
Yeah.
This is going to be completely outside the box, random.
Yeah.
But I think you'll see the thread in my life playing out post this, okay? Way back when I was in high school, I applied for a job at a supermarket. And at that interview, I had working another job.
Yeah.
And in that interview, they're asking questions, and I was just a dumb young kid, right? And I spoke negative of my previous employer. And the second that those words came out of my mouth, I could see the change in the way the interviewer was sitting and realized I just blew it.
That's good. This is powerful.
I just stinking blew it. And when I got back, mom's like, how'd it go? And I blew it. They didn't offer me a job right there, right?
Right.
And it's like and so I learned thankfully I learned it young, right?
Right.
I learned a really hard lesson early on that there is no benefit ever to complaining or looking for sympathy, right?
Yeah.
You get up in the morning and you go.
This is good,
You go
people.
work out
Yeah.
at the gym, and you were up before everybody else, and you worked long and hard, and you ended up working halfway through the night because you got paperwork to do, and you got 6 other things in the fire that you're trying to get done. And it's like, if the world only knew how hard you were working, they'd be like, "Oh, dude,
I feel bad for you. I'm going to go
Yeah.
buy a bunch of flowers today."
right?"
Yeah.
It's like seriously, you had to send your kids to camp. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
It's like there's no benefit to looking for sympathy.
No.
It doesn't.
Doesn't matter.
It tears people down. It doesn't build them up.
Right. Because at the end of the day, I think people that do, typically when people treat people bad or poorly, it could be a different company. It's typically the reason people are treating it's something internally, that something happened in their life or something that's gone bad or wrong.
But I want a job with you because my other job was so hard and so bad and so
Right.
That's not what draws. If you're a leader, that's not what draws people to you.
No.
You know what draws people to you? Kindness.
Yeah.
Humility. Right?
Yeah. This is good.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Stupid drive that people can't understand why you do it.
Yeah, because you do stand out, right? And it's that drive that you have, and I think that's what they're looking at. And then the moment you said that about another company, you were looking for them to sit there and say to you, "Oh yeah, well we're not that."
I understand exactly.
Yeah.
We can commiserate with that. We're not like that. We're going to be so much better. I feel so bad that you had to go through that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I realized way back then, don't ever say something negative. And to this day, when I interview people for STEMs, if they speak negative of their employer in any way, fashion, or form, it's like, no, shoot, you were looking so good too.
Yeah, seriously. No, I get it. And I've been guilty of it. I have been guilty of it. But you do learn those lessons. And one of the things I do want to drive home is if you are that person that does do that, you can change today, right? And that's the thing is I've made a lot of mistakes earlier. And that's kind of honestly the way I look at it in life is you can make a lot of mistakes, but learn from them.
Right.
You learn from that moment. You're like, crap, doesn't mean you didn't make it. You made the mistake.
Oh, yeah. And I paid a price, right?
And you paid a price.
I didn't get the job.
But own that price. Instead of just sitting there saying, and this guy didn't hire me because of it, just own it and saying, all right, I'm owning the situation. I can adjust.
That's good stuff right there, though, right? Like, there's a whole nother conversation and podcast right there. As an entrepreneur, own it.
Yeah.
It's easy to own the wins. own the losses.
Right.
Because if you don't own the losses, you'll never learn from the losses.
100%. And you get to be, honestly, I'm to that point now where I'm thankful for every little thing. I mean, I've had some pretty hard things happen in my life, but I'm thankful for every minute and every situation of it, because it defined who I am today. And that's why I am where I'm at today.
Yep.
So do you have a question you'd like to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to take a piece of paper out of here and then put your stamp on the next one, roll it up, and stick it in there.
So I thought about this, and I was struggling, but I got it.